Hi, my name is Sam Woods. I'm a guide for tropical birding tours, and I've been guiding this tour, Costa Rica, the Intra Tour, on 7 different occasions so far. I'm going to give you a bit of a brief introduction to the tour, and then I'll take you through a more detailed account day by day. So Costa Rica is in Central America, wedged between Nicaragua to the north and Panama to the south. And one of the amazing things about it is, even though it's a small country equivalent to the US state of West Virginia or the European country of Denmark, it has an amazing list of over 900 bird species in this tropical country. This tour can be considered a kind of best of Costa Rica, because as you can see on the map, there are 4 biogeographic zones, and on this tour we go to the Caribbean slope, we go to 2 different sites in the highlands, and we also cover the South Pacific slope, while being on the transition with the North Pacific slope, so we get a sample of all 4 bioregions in this 11-day tour. It's a good trip and an interesting trip for those who are looking for tropical families like trogons, motmots, oropendulas, and cotingas. And in addition to looking for tropical families, which is particularly appealing for people who've never been to the tropics, or for people who just want to see those groups they can't see back home, we can also see boreal migrants. So in the North American winter, when we run this tour, like the February departures, we often get birds like black-throated green warbler, black and white warbler, chestnut-sided warbler, and this prothonotary warbler. And the other thing of appeal, of course, is it's a birding trip, but it's one of these trips where you see a lot of other things too. So it's good for animals like these mantled howler monkeys. It's an excellent place to see your first sloth. This is a Hoffman's 2-toed, but we often have 3-toed on the trip too. And of course, all the accommodations are really good. We're staying where the birds are, with birds right on our doorstep. So that is an overview of what makes this trip appealing. So on day 1, everybody arrives in the capital via San Jose International Airport, and then a hotel shuttle will take you to the hotel, only about a 20-minute drive from there. There's no birding on this day, but everyone meets up at evening for dinner and to run through the next day. The next day we open in the hotel gardens, which is in the Central Valley of Costa Rica at about 1,000 meters elevation, or about 3,300 feet. We often see this guy around, very common species in Costa Rica, and its national bird, the clay-coloured thrush. By this swimming pool we often find spot-breasted oriole, and behind the hotel cabins we can often find ferruginous pygmy owl. And then after breakfast on the same day, so this is day 2, we head north to the Caribbean foothills. This is dropping in elevation to about 500 meters, about 1,650 feet. And we visit a small hummingbird garden on the edge of Braulio Carrillo National Park, which is located here. We look for basically hummingbirds coming and going in the banks of Verbena flowers, which is kind of like an opening within a forest on all sides provided by the Braulio Carrillo National Park. So this is one of the key hummingbirds there, the snowcap. Green thorntail is a lot more common than that one, as is the crowned wood nymph. And while we're there looking for hummingbirds coming to the shrubs, we also keep an eye out on the trees surrounding for any mixed flocks that come through, because they could have tanagers in them like these. Then we move on to a little lower down, still on the Caribbean side. We go to a private reserve to look for roosting owls. Sometimes the local guides have spectacled owl roosting, and rarer still is the crested owl, but you can get them on both on the same afternoon if things go well. And they also have some feeders there. I should mention this is another of their roosting nocturnal birds, the great potu. And then they also have feeders there where birds like shining honeycreeper come in, green honeycreeper, as well as red-legged honeycreeper. Maybe we'll get our first toucan, this collared araceli. And then at the end of that day, which is day 2, we move north to that red circled area, which is the area of La Selva Biological Station, where we stayed 2 nights. Now we've arrived in La Selva Biological Station, where we stay either in the station in the tourist cabins, or we stay on a lodge nearby, depending on availability. Now, this is a Caribbean lowland forest, only about 40 meters elevation, and so that's about 160 feet. And it's very easily accessible. It has some beautiful Caribbean lowland forest, and because it's a research station, which accepts about 300 scientists a year, about 100 different university courses. The forest is set up for researchers, so there are lots of wide open flat trails, many of them paved and concrete, so the researchers can get between the different study sites rapidly when they need to. What this means for us is it's very easy to be birding on the trails in this area in groups. It's excellent birding and very easy in terms of physically to do it. So on this day, which is day 3 now, we spend the entire day at La Selva, and then we spend the morning of day 4 in La Selva. So this now refers to that area. Around the clearing, where we'll have our breakfasts and meals at the canteen, we often get woodpeckers like chestnut-coloured woodpecker, cinnamon woodpecker, and the shrubs that are around the restaurant that are very good for fruit-eating birds like this golden-hooded tanager. While the taller trees at the edge of the clearing, these mature trees that are part of a 1,500 hectare reserve, attract birds like keel-billed toucan as well as yellow-throated toucan. The fruits around the restaurant and the clearing also attract this black-cowled oriole. And this is another thing to bring up about La Selva. Walking these trails, we often come across birds that are very shy in other countries, heavily persecuted for hunting because they're big game birds. Whereas in Costa Rica, and particularly in protected areas like this, strictly protected areas like La Selva, you can often get real close-ups of these birds that could be shy and difficult to see in other areas, like this great curassow and this great tinamou, normally shy forest birds. And of course, La Selva is going to get us a lot of those exotic tropical families we're looking for, like rufous-tailed jacamar, toucans, as I've already mentioned, hummingbirds, tanagers, motmots, trogons. This is a semi-plumbeous hawk, often found on one of the beginning of the forest trails. And then I should also mention that La Selva is good not only for birds, but other animals too. This is a red-eyed tree frog. Underfoot in the leaf litter, we can often hear and then find the strawberry poison dart frog or blue jeans frog due to its blue legs. And it's also an excellent place for seeing sloths, monkeys and agoutis too, as well as this guy, the green iguana. So that's our time in La Selva and the Caribbean lowlands wrapped up. Okay, so on the afternoon day 4, after spending the morning in the Caribbean lowlands, we'll drive south to that red circle area, which is the Cervegre Valley, and this is part of the upper mountains in the highlands. We'll be staying at an elevation of about 2,200 meters or 7,200 feet, and then our period in the area will see us birding from that elevation up to 3,300 meters or 9,900 feet when we reach the highest point. So we'll be spending all of day 5 birding there and the morning of day 6. As you can see, the habitats change markedly from the Caribbean lowlands, much skinnier trees, lots more epiphytes, lots of oak trees bringing acorn woodpeckers into the equation, and full of bromeliads that you can see on the right there. So this is cloud forest. This is the Cervegre River here, and we stay just alongside here. And the cloud forest has some very different species to what we've experienced already. Not least the most famous of them all, the resplendent quetzal, considered one of the world's best birds and considered one of the world's must-see birds for the appearance of it alone. It often nests either on the property we stay in or nearby, so we have a very good chance of seeing it. In all the 15 years of running the tours, we've never missed it. Mixed flocks are another thing to look out for, and the thing about the highlands is there are a lot of birds here that even if you've been to South America, there are a lot of Central American mountain birds that are endemic to Central America, this being one of them, flame-throated warbler. And here's another, yellow-thighed finch, a bit of a weird one. The tour is good for for warblers in general, and this one's collared redstart, again one of the ones that's a rarity or a local endemic, I should say, confined to the mountains of Costa Rica and Panama. Flame-coloured tanager, you might be familiar with this one from southwest Arizona, much more common here, a common mountain bird. This is another one of those mountain birds that's a regional endemic, so if you've never visited Panama or Costa Rica, you wouldn't have got this one yet. It's a large-footed finch. And then Costa Rica in general has a lot of nightingale thrushes related to the Swainson's thrush and hermit thrush of North America. They have beautiful songs, and this is the highest ranging of these, the black-billed nightingale thrush. This is one of the only parrots you see up high. At this high elevation, we only usually get barred parakeet, and this one, the sulphur-winged parakeet. This is a much more easy to see bird. It's a kind of finch, a sooty-capped chlorospingus, that is often found in mixed flocks with birds like that flame-throated warbler that we mentioned earlier. And then here's a bit more of an alien family to most, the silky flycatchers. There is one in North America called Phainopepala, which looks nothing like this. This is the black and yellow silky flycatcher, and in the same area you can get the long-tailed silky flycatcher too. So it could well be a new family for some. And at the highest point of the tour we go up to this place called Cerro de la Muerte, otherwise known as Hill of Death, because before cars came into the equation, people would try and cross from the Caribbean and Pacific side of the mountains over the top, and they'd use this area to cross over, and people would often die on that journey. Luckily now we can just drive up, get out of the car, spend just a short time there looking for highland specialties like this volcano junco, which is only accessible on about 2 or 3 peaks in Central America, so very localized bird. And last but not least, the mountains are always good for hummingbirds, whether it's the upper mountains or lower mountains we'll come to later. This is a scintillant hummingbird, possible around the hotel we stay in. Lesser violet is also possible around there, and we go to an excellent set of feeders as well, where a lot of these birds are very easy to see and to get photographs like this. And white-throated mountain gem, that's another one that's often in the garden of the hotel, along with other mountain endemics like this one. And probably most people's favourite hummingbird from the tour, the fiery-throated hummingbird. We go to a particular set of feeders where we dedicate about an hour of our time just to admire this bird and all the other hummingbirds flying around with it. So on the afternoon of day 6, we'll have spent the morning in the upper mountains of the highlands, and then we drive south and west, about a 3-hour drive, to the Karara National Park area, which is in the Pacific lowlands, down into hot steamy again at an elevation of about 100 meters, 330 feet. We usually try and break up that journey with a stop into some drier, open country. One of the things that's neat about that area circled on the map is it sits right at the border of the South Pacific region, which it's technically part of, and the North Pacific region, which is much drier and has more open woodland and different species. So we try and do a bit of a combination in the Karara area of doing the drier, more open wooded areas with the wetter, lush forest areas, and then we also do a boat trip there. So this takes up the afternoon of day 6, all of day 7, and the morning of day 8. So stopping in the dry areas, this is one of the birds we are targeting big time, is the turquoise-browed motmot, which is actually very common as you get into the right habitat. So it's one of those spectacular but easy birds to see once you get to the right habitat. And by visiting a small reserve near Orotina in the dry Pacific lowlands, we have a chance to see, with the help of a local guide, Alvaro, to see birds like this roosting, sleeping Pacific screech owl, and black-headed trogon, which becomes fairly common in those drier parts of the Pacific. And our starbird there, if we had some luck, is to see the lesser ground cuckoo, which kind of does what it says on the tin. It's a cuckoo that is very terrestrial, and it's often the highlight of our time there. The other birds we could see there are things like roosting barn owl, pearl kite, and sometimes you get other birds like double-striped thickening. Okay, so moving on to the next day. So this is day 7. All of day 7 is spent in Karara area. This is Pacific lowlands again. And what we do is we do some birding around the hotel in the morning before breakfast, and then the main part of the morning is spent on a forest trail within the national park Karara in the Pacific lowlands, which is much wetter than the day before. And then we come back to the lodge for lunch and have a boat trip in the afternoon. So it's a nice combination of things. Around the hotel, just sort of a pre-breakfast walk, we can often find scarlet macaws flying over. The hotel is actually named after them, and this is the #1 area in the country to see them, as they're extremely well protected. And if we don't get them then, we can often get them on the boat trip in the afternoon, which, if we stay till quite late in the afternoon, you can get hundreds of these birds coming out of the forested hills to roost in the mangroves in the late afternoon. Once we get on the forest trails in the park, we'll be hoping for things like lowland species and lowland bird groups like antbirds. This is a bicoloured antbird, and if we have some luck, we might find an ant swarm of army ants. And certain birds like this bird, this species, they follow these army ants. They're called obligate ant followers, and they follow them to pick up the prey that the army ants scare away as they're trying to get at them. So the army ants are looking for insect prey. The insect prey crawls up plants and flies away, and things like the bicoloured antbird, wood creepers, motmots and others come in and they try and take advantage and pick off the prey, but they don't actually eat the antbirds themselves. On the more open trails and also around the lodge, we have a good chance of this bird. It's called a fiery-billed aracari, a tall toucan species that's only found in Central America. And then we're back to a deep forest bird, a white-whiskered puffbird. This is another one of those families, the puffbirds, that you could consider very much tropical, and you wouldn't have come across them unless you've been to the American tropics. They're kind of like in-forest kingfishers that feed on insects. And Karara is also good for other animals too. This northern ghost bat on the left we often find on one particular trail. Scarlet-rumped tanager is very much a bird of forest edge and secondary forest, and so we often see both of these in our visits to Karara. And as you can see on the left, there's a picture of Karara National Park. You see it's very broad, buttressed, big rainforest trees, lowland, Pacific lowlands, sort of jungle if you like. Now, why is there a picture of an owl at night on the right? Well, during the afternoon, after we've had our lunch, we drive out to a place called Tarcoles to do our boat trip. And sometimes we'll stop just along the way at a regular spot where sometimes you can get black and white owls roosting, sleeping in the daytime. And that's one of the neat things about this trip. On some tours, if your luck's in, you can see multiple species of owl without going out at night. On one trip we had recently, we saw 6 different owls, all of them in daytime. Even though that was exceptional, it's not unheard of. So in the afternoon, we go out for 2 to 3 hours on a boat along the Tarcoles River, and also checking out a mangrove-lined creek near side. This is where we look for things like herons. It's an excellent trip for herons. We get boat-billed heron often, yellow-crowned night heron, black-crowned night heron, this bare-throated tiger heron, great egrets, snowy egrets, roseate spoonbills. So it's excellent for water birds. Often get some shorebirds too, and we get some songbirds along the edge of the mangroves as well. So one of our constant companions on this trip, we do this trip by a motorized boat, which is private to us, so it's just the tropical birding group, plus your guide, plus a local guide boatman who knows where the birds are. This is one we won't need any pointing out to. It's a mangrove swallow. This is perched on the boat. And as I say, we go into the mangroves for species like mangrove vireo, mangrove warbler, Panama flycatcher, and these birds, common black hawk and boat-billed heron. And sometimes we get some rarer species like mangrove hummingbird or northern scrub flycatcher too. So on the afternoon of day 8, we'll have driven to Monte Verde, to the lower mountains. This is a drive now because of recently paved roads. Only takes 2 to 3 hours maximum. So usually we arrive there in the afternoon and maybe have some stops on the birding on the way up, and also around the hotel in the sort of more drier forest on the edges of the town. We stay in the town for 2 nights. The town's actually called Santa Elena, but we stay in a lodge there. But most people think that town's actually Monte Verde, but it's called Santa Elena. On the drive up, we'll be keeping an eye out in the more open woodlands for this bird, the white-throated magpie jay. Even though this is really common in the North Pacific, because we don't get into the heart of that, this is our best chance when we're driving from Karara to the lower mountains of Monte Verde on day 8 of the tour. And at the end of the day and the following morning, on day 9, we'll be doing some birding around the hotel grounds. This is probably one of the best places to see the white-eared ground sparrow hopping around the flower beds of verbena flowers. And the Lessons motmot loves to come to the feeders and the fruit there, so that's often waiting for us in the garden somewhere. And so that's, and also we can see the orange-bellied or collared trogon around the property too, as well as orange-billed nightingale thrush. So that's usually how the end of day 8 finishes and the morning of day 9. So the morning of day 9 we do a bit of birding around the hotel. Then we go to one of the Monte Verde reserves in town. And then in the afternoon we visit the famous Monte Verde reserve, the main one, which is in cloud forest, where you get this bird on the right, the black-faced solitaire. We usually leave visiting the reserve till the afternoon because the mornings are very busy, and it's nice to have a quiet time in the reserve in the afternoon where it's still easy to find the birds at that time, which are quite unafraid of people due to the number of people that visit there. The black-faced solitaire has one of the most characteristic sounds of the cloud forest, and I'm just going to pause here for a minute while you can listen to that. Okay, I hope you appreciated that. So the plan for these days is, so the day of day 9, we're at the whole day in the Monte Verde area. After birding at the hotel, we go to one of the small reserves around town. We usually do either Monte Verde Ecological Sanctuary or another reserve called Curicancha, where this bird was taken, the golden-browed Chloriphonia, which likes to hang out in clumps of mistletoe with elegant euphonia. So the purpose of combining these two reserves with a more famous reserve is that we get into the cloud forest, but we also get into some dry wooded areas that have other birds like long-tailed manakin, ruddy wood creeper, and other sort of birds that wouldn't get into the wet cloud forest. But in the wet cloud forest, in the main reserve, and also some upper parts of Curicancha Reserve, one of the neighbouring ones, we could see birds like spangle-cheeked tanager, pictured here. This is a bird of mixed flocks, can often see it in with boreal migrants like golden-winged warbler, as well as other resident warblers like Costa Rican warbler. One of the main family birds that people are interested in if they're collecting all the world's families, this is part of the toucan barbet family. It's a bird called prong-billed barbet that likes the wet cloud forests. It has a really distinctive duet call, they do in pairs, and I'm going to listen for that right now. While we walk around those forests, we'll be looking for mixed flocks which have the birds like the slate-throated redstart we've got here. And they can be mixed in with ruddy tree runners, boreal warblers, things like red-faced spinetails, sometimes orange-bellied or collared trogons. And then we get to one of Costa Rica's and Monte Verde's most special birds. This is the three-wattle bellbird. Now I should be clear on this bird. It's a kind of cotinga, and it's a migratory bird. So it undergoes local migratory movements in Central America, and so it's best seen if you go on the July version of our intro tour. The February versions are usually a bit early for this bird because it often turns up and starts singing a lot in March when it's easier to find, and their calls can be heard from far away. It's a spectacular looking bird and spectacular sounding bird, so as I say, if you want this one, come in July, peak breeding season. And I'm handing over to the three-wattle bellbird now. And so moving towards the end of this presentation, the other thing that the mountains are always good for is hummingbirds. As you saw that earlier in the higher mountains, there's plenty of hummingbirds there. And in the lower mountains, there's another discrete set which are also interesting too. And we go into two areas where they have hummingbird feeders, in Curicancha Reserve and also in the main reserve they have a hummingbird garden there with birds like this purple-throated mountain gem, this striped-throated hummingbird, and this spectacular violet saboing. Another regular bird there is actually endemic to the country called a coppery-headed emerald, and we often also get green hermits there too. So it's a great place to end the tour, this main site of Monte Verde. We spend all of day 9 there, morning of day 10 at one of the local reserves, and then we drive back to San Jose, about a 3-4 hour drive on the afternoon of day 10, having a final farewell dinner before all departing on day 11. Monte Verde is also good for mammals. This is the white-nosed coati. I wanted to just say thanks for watching this. I hope you've got a feel of the country from there. I hope you understand that Costa Rica offers good natural history as well as excellent birding. It's a place where you feel at home as a birder and has many protected areas to go to. And this particular 11-day tour is a great overview of the main biogeographic regions and therefore gives you a good spread of birds, from wetland birds to warblers and everything in between, and lots of nice tropical families and other animals to enjoy. I hope you enjoy it. It's one of my favourite tours and I hope to see you on it sometime soon.